Hello there, happy Money Monday, and welcome back to another episode of the Empowered and Abundant podcast. This week, I am sitting down with my client, Amy. We're talking about her journey, deciding to join Empowered Abundance, her experience going through this program, and what it has been like for her since completing the program a few months ago. Because enrollment is currently open for the next round of Empowered Abundance, I wanted to share with you real life examples and stories of what it is like to do this work. Not just the tangible work of learning to manage and get in control of your money, but also the internal work of changing your mindsets, your thoughts, your beliefs around money, and your sense of self-worth. And Amy is such a great example of what it is like to do this work and how it impacts your real life. And I'm really excited for you to tune in and hear her journey through Empowered Abundance. Before we begin, right now, enrollment is open for the next round of Empowered Abundance, which means now is the time to schedule a free 60-minute consultation with me where we'll talk all about if Empowered Abundance is the right next step for you, exactly how Empowered Abundance will support you in stepping into your next level of abundance and creating your abundant life, and deciding if this is the round and if this is the time for you. Enrollment ends July 13th, so be sure to schedule your consultation now before doors close and before spots fill up. You can schedule your consultation using the link in the show notes below or by going to my website, thebizhippie.com/abundance. And with that, sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode. Hello there, Amy, and welcome to the Empowered and Abundant podcast. Thank you so much for joining
Thanks so much
today.
for having me.
I'm really excited for this conversation. It's always my favorite conversation to talk about Empowered Abundance with people who have been through this experience. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today is your journey going through the Empowered Abundance program. And before we dive in, I would love for you to introduce yourself to all of the listeners. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you
I'm
do.
Amy, and I'm a special education teacher. And I met you on a retreat, and we just got to talking, and I learned about what you do. And it just seemed like that came at the right time because I was sort of at a little bit of a crossroads career-wise and trying to make decision, and money was a big part of that.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more. If you can flash back to, and I know this was a while ago, almost a year ago when we first met, but what did your life look like? What did your relationship with money look like? Can you just give us a snapshot of a day in the life of Amy and where you were at, what you were dealing with before we met, before joining and going through the Empowered Abundance program?
I feel like I was someone who was pretty responsible with money. I always had it in my mind about like doing things the right way. And I was someone like years past who had gotten deep into just reading all about personal finance and following like the Dave Ramsey program or getting into the FIRE movement. But it was always just this like low key background anxiety about money. So it didn't matter that I was, doing all the right things, I guess, and just trying to like stick to a budget and not have any debt and have an emergency fund. I always still felt pretty stressed about money. And there was sort of this pattern of I would be saving money and then something would happen just, day to day, like not day to day, but like a life issue would happen. And then I'd have to tap into that and start all over again. And it would just sort of make me feel like really frustrated because I felt like then I wasn't really getting ahead. And then where I was career wise, I was going into my 21st year of teaching and just wasn't really sure if it was for me anymore. There were just like a lot of changes, and I was trying to figure out if I wanted to stay at the school that I was in, or if I wanted to try a different school, or if I wanted to leave teaching altogether and just try something completely different. And I wanted to have someone that could kind of like walk me through my finances a little bit to really see the full picture to know what would be the next best step.
Yeah. Oh, this is such a great picture. And I think what's really interesting about you and your journey is, I work with a variety of people in empowered abundance. Most of them, like 70% of them, really have no idea what's going on with their money. Like they don't track it, they don't manage it, they're not on top of it, they avoid it, they're afraid to look at it. But then the other 30% of my clients are people who manage their money. And I think it's really interesting as someone who was already managing your money, was already very responsible, was already implementing a lot of strategy, and had done a lot of deep research in a lot of strategy, how even though you had all those things in place, there was still this feeling of I can't get ahead and I'm feeling stuck. So I just really want to point that out, that it's interesting how we can feel like we're doing the right things and being strategic and being responsible with money, and yet something is still missing when it comes to actually feeling abundant and actually living an abundant
And
life.
just right out the gate, one of the biggest things that this program helped me with was really just seeing and developing awareness of how honestly like obsessed I had become about my money. So I know you've talked about this about people who don't look at their money at all, but I was looking at my accounts every single day and then paying bills like as they came in every single day. So it was sort of like just the opposite end of the spectrum where it was in my face constantly just checking accounts. And I think I know now that I was doing that to try to create a sense of safety, but that was only really making the problem worse.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's such an awesome perspective of the flip side of the coin, right? And you can think that you're doing the right thing. Like, I'm doing the right thing, I'm being responsible, but at the same time, it's being fueled by this sense of fear and this sense of scarcity. And so, all the action that you're taking is just adding on the stress, adding on the scarcity, adding on the fear, especially when there's this underlying feeling that no matter what you do, no matter how often you check it, some other bill just sweeps in out of the blue and you can never get ahead. So that's a really challenging, frustrating place to be in, of constantly worrying about money, constantly checking your accounts. And so I'm really wondering too, that was what you were experiencing at the time, but how did you know that empowered abundance was the right next step for you? Because you could have done a lot of different things to attempt to try to solve this problem. So I'm really curious to know, like, what stood out to you or what helped you make your decision to say, yep, empowered abundance is the next right step for me.
There were a couple of things going on at that time, and I really stepped out of my comfort zone in such a big way in those couple of months leading up to that because I wasn't someone who had really invested money in myself in that way. So I'd be someone that would, you know, just read books or watch free content on YouTube, like so many videos on the same topics. But I hadn't really ever experienced coaching before. Like the closest that I had gotten to coaching would be like traditional therapy, which I felt for myself, could only get me so far, really. And I would say that coaching has really helped me in a lot of ways beyond the scope of just money, because the things that you taught in your program I'm able to apply to other areas of my life. It's so interesting how these like certain strategies that you taught at the beginning, some of the inner work, I can catch myself seeing those patterns in other areas of my life and saying, "Oh, you're doing that thing. Let's do this instead." So that's been really helpful, but I feel like at that time it had just really reached like a peak, I guess, where I was like, I really need to figure out one way or the other because I'd been in sort of this pattern for, I don't know, a couple years, definitely post COVID, of just figure like complaining constantly about certain things about my job and just being in this pattern of feeling stuck and feeling like I couldn't move because I felt too locked in. And then, but I'd also feel like I'm over giving it work, but I'm not really having the experience or the feeling that I want to have from this. I'm not really getting the results that I want for the effort I'm putting in. And I was just kind of going back and forth all the time. So this is part of the money thing too, is that I was constantly going back to my accounts and my own spreadsheets and trying to project into the future all the time of like, okay, if I can work this many years, then I could retire at this age with this amount of money. And just going back and forth all the time was really exhausting. So then I met you at that retreat. And I was also getting into another program that was just more about spirituality and sort of like changing your brain and training it in other ways and meditation and things like that. So it just kind of, I felt like both things were necessary at that time. And that was the scariest part because like I said, I wasn't someone who would invest like large amounts of money in anything. Like most people would say, like, I'm pretty like, I wouldn't say like frugal, where like I'm cheap and I don't spend money at all, but extremely strategic and just always weighing things out, and
Hmm.
always feeling like, oh, I can just do this myself. Like I can figure this out by myself. And so I just decided to go for it. And I was like, no, I think like I could really benefit from this additional help. And I remember us talking about it in our intro call, and one of the main things on my mind was about Germany because travel with my family is really important. We go on like a yearly vacation, and my kids are older now. My oldest is going off to college in like 3 years, so that time felt really like important to me to really like get these trips in before they're older and living their own lives and things like that. So I was really like sort of debating on it and talking to you about, well, I'm trying to save up this money to go to Germany, but I really want to do this program. And I don't know, like my gut just said, just go for this. And the funny part about it was that not even like halfway through the program, like I managed to like figure out a way to make that work. And I had booked the trip to Germany, which we're going on next month.
Oh my gosh. Ah, that is so exciting and so incredible. And like such a huge celebration, honestly, because I believe every time, so this is like Empowered Abundance Foundations. When we use our money, we can create our life. Like our money is a tool to create our life. And especially when we make bigger investments in ourselves. That's just one powerful way to use your money really intentionally to create the life you want to live. So, for you to go from somebody who didn't invest in yourself financially, didn't make big purchases on yourself, who mostly relied on YouTube and reading books, and I'm going to do it myself and I'm going to figure it out, which also I can totally relate to. I also used to be that person. I'm a big like I'm going to figure it out myself. I'm very competent. I can do it alone. So to go from that to being somebody who made several massive investments in yourself in a row while also potentially risking your ability to be able to travel with your family, which is really important to you. I'm really wondering, like, who do you think you became just in that chunk of time when you made those decisions and made those investments? Like, what impact did that alone have on you?
I feel like maybe this is a simplistic answer because I do feel like it's probably more complex than this, but I do feel like I became a more like self-loving person. And I know that sounds like probably kind of cliche, but I feel like I was used to being responsible all the time, and not just for myself, but for my family, for the people that I work with. And I would just put all this pressure on myself all the time to just like succeed at a certain level. And I just felt just really maxed out at that point is the best way to put it. So by like choosing to do the programs, I felt like I was choosing myself and my own like mental health and my mental well-being, because I felt like I've gotten this far doing it myself, but I definitely need more support. And I feel like that was probably what I felt like I was lacking the most. It's feeling like I only had myself to talk through these things with. I mean, I could talk to my family about it too, but they're coming at that from a different perspective as a family member than they than someone who like runs a program like this.
Yeah, yeah. Being able to invest in yourself in that powerful way really is a deep act of self love and saying, hey, like, this is what's important to me. My life is what's important to me. I'm what's important to me. And I'm hitting this breaking point where I've already waited however many years to get here. So it's time to do something about it. And I don't want to live this way anymore. I want to change things. So I'm celebrating you for that epic decision. That's so powerful. And especially like the dramatic shift that you had to make to even be someone who is capable of making those big, scary, out of the blue investments. So, congratulations. It's a huge deal. And let's talk about your time going through the program. I'd love to hear what were some of the highlights, the biggest aha moments, the biggest wins, the biggest celebrations. I know you mentioned the beginning of the program and what stood out to you there, but walk us through like what were some of the biggest moments for you?
So, obviously, towards the middle of the program, I felt more in my element when you started getting to the more like tangible side of money because spreadsheets is my love language. I love a good spreadsheet. We had talked about that and joked about that a lot. But even your spreadsheets and the way that you introduced them were different from mine and helped me in a lot of ways. And we can get to that part. But for me, I would say, based on where I was coming from and the things that I was dealing with, definitely the inner work, the looking at the scarcity selves, the scarcity seeds, writing all of that out, talking about it, was really helpful. But I do actually feel like for me, one of the best parts of the program, I think this speaks to from where I was coming from before, where it was just like all on me to figure it out, was that I had you, but I also had the cohort. And it's really helpful to kind of go
Mm,
through a program like this with a group of people and be able to chat. Like I would try to be there for the real time part, but even just sharing my questions and then hearing them on replay if I was at work and couldn't be there, and hearing other people's stories that were different but also similar themes was really helpful to me. So I definitely feel like looking at those stories and talking to those selves and getting to know them more was really helpful because then I could look at, all right, this is this aspect that's feeling this way about things, and how can I deal with that one particular self who isn't just all me doing this. It was really interesting to be able to separate that instead of just saying like, oh, I'm X, Y, and Z. It's like, no, there's a part of me that thinks and feels this way, and there's also this part of me that thinks and feels this way. And how can I get all of that on board so that the whole me is feeling good about the decisions that I'm making instead of having like this scared
mm.
or frantic part of me like taking the wheel.
Yeah, I love the way that you frame this, and there's a few things that I really want to highlight for people who are listening. One is I love that you gained so much value from being in the group. I find that because money is such a taboo subject and is often like shameful, and we don't talk about it with other people, just even being able to talk about it with other people and see other people's financial situations or perspectives or where they're starting from, that's really powerful. It brings a totally other layer and dimension into money. But also, I want to highlight as well, you were someone that very regularly, very consistently could not come to the live calls just because of the timing and because of your schedule. And honestly, you really crushed that. You really crushed participating live in a container where you were not able to be there live. And I actually talk about you very often when I'm talking with other people about the program. And they're like, I can't come to the live calls. And I'm like, that's okay. I know not everybody can come to the live calls, and you can come to none of the live calls, but it's set up in a way where you can still get the full live experience, but it depends on how you show up to it. And so I really want to highlight the way that you showed up in the container allowed you to still get that cohort value, even though you couldn't fully attend all the live calls. So I just want to shout that out big time. And then the other thing I want to highlight is everything you said about the internal work. And just to summarize that for people who haven't gone through Empowered Abundance and don't know the full nuances of the program, it sounds like really seeing clearly how we are creating our current life and how different forms of scarcity are holding us back, and developing really deep self awareness of how am I in control of my life? How am I currently creating my reality? And how can I shift that? And how can I change that so that I can have more control over my life? It sounds like those foundational tools and skill sets were impactful, not just when you first learned them, but I know you mentioned earlier that you still
Mm-hmm.
use them.
And even though, I mean, the whole order of operations for the whole 6 month program was just so well thought out, because you start us off with that inner work and then the tangible, but then you bring us back to the vision part of it. And that was really fun. That was, I mean, that is the most fun part of it, but it's, I can see where we wouldn't want to start with that, because if we haven't addressed these other things first, it's kind of hard to tap into that vision and then figure out how to make it happen. So everything you walk us through, like step by step each week, really like built off of each other and just made it easy to kind of navigate everything.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. I'm like really receiving that as well. I'm like, yeah, I put a lot of work into this program. So I really am glad that that was received. And I wanted to go back to something you said earlier too, of especially because you're somebody who did manage your money. And again, like I find myself working with two kinds of people who have never managed their money at all, or people who already do have a system for managing their money. And part of what we do in Empowered Abundance is I teach you a framework and a system for managing, tracking, and being in control of your money. And I know you said that my spreadsheets were different than your spreadsheets and that that made a difference. So I'd love for you to share a little bit more on that. Like, what was different and what impact did it have that you were missing before?
Mostly, I just had the one spreadsheet that sort of tracked everything, and I would just, post up, you know, how much I was making and what bills I had that month. But the way you set it up is like for a whole year, and then you had us sort of build on it, but then you had us do, I don't know, it's all in one frame. I don't want to give like too much away, but you had us like just look at what was going on and then sort of plan out as much as we could for the year ahead and thinking about that. And then you'd add some like additional things as the program went on to sort of compare it to or to plan for other things. And in the past, it's funny because as much as I was like being responsible and looking at my money all the time and paying bills, like I said, like the credit card would come through, like something would come through on it and I would just pay it immediately because I was just like so afraid of just like weird stuff. I went from, so basically from this program, I went from like paying bills every day to just paying my credit card off once a month and just looking at my money once a
Wow.
week. And that has made such a difference because nothing has changed in terms of the level of responsibility. I feel actually more in control about my money looking at it less than I was when I was obsessively doing
Wow.
it. And this is something that it says has applied to other areas of my life where I realized that being a controlling person was just like a part of my nature. That was one part of me. I had this part of me. And I could see it showing up in how I presented at work in some ways, even with my health and fitness, and just always being someone who was tracking all the time because I felt like, well, if I'm tracking all the time, I'm staying on top of things, but it never gave me the results that I wanted. And ultimately, I think the feeling I wanted was
Mm-hmm.
peace and freedom. And being so honestly obsessive about everything, it's the opposite of that. That's the opposite of being free. It's the opposite of being
Mm-hmm.
peaceful. And I would just tell myself these like silly stories about how that was the right thing to do. When now it's like I just show up for a weekly meeting with myself in a really cozy way. I look at my numbers and then I pay my bills on one specific date. And it's just so much more. It just frees up my time, but also my mental energy for other things. It allows for more relaxation, more downtime, more just enjoying life instead of just obsessing about trying to make things happen all the time. Make things happen financially, make things
Mm.
happen at work, make things happen with my health and fitness or my hobbies or whatever. It's now there's just this sense of like, I can breathe through this. I can approach all these different aspects of my life in just a more peaceful way and just feel just a greater sense of well being, honestly.
Oh my gosh, I love this. And I love that we're recording this for the podcast because again, you're such a polar opposite example of where most people are coming from. And so I imagine that people who don't manage their money and feel stressed out about money, when they imagine managing their money, they imagine it looking and having to look something like where you started from, where it's I got to look at it all the time. It takes so much work. It's so hard. It's so complicated. It's exhausting. It's frustrating. It's limiting. It's restricting. I can't do the things I want to do because I'm budgeting. But that's also not having a healthy relationship with money versus this balance in the middle where you're able to actually look at it less and feel more calm and feel more in control of it because you can see it clearly. You know what's going on. You're not rushing. You're not hustling. You're not panicking. You're not taking financial actions from a place of fear. You're just making slow, conscious, strategic decisions with your money based on what you're seeing there in front of you.
Exactly. And now, even when lifes, because the month after the program, there were just crazy things that happened. One of our dogs had to go to the emergency vet appointment, just things like that. I don't feel that like it doesn't feel like a typhoon or like a tsunami of emotions coming over me of like, ah. And that was the other thing too. And we had talked about this a lot is yes, on the one hand, I would be grateful for the emergency fund and be like, well, I always had the money to do it. But it was always coming with this like just really negative energy around it. And now instead, even when those things are happening, I can just kind of breathe through it and be like, okay, like that's actually just a natural part of life. Like that's just how life works. But by
Mm.
able to track it the way you've set it up for us, then I'm able to see like, okay, but how often is this actually happening? Because it would feel like this happens to me all the time. Like I'm just constantly manifesting these horrible things to happen and I can't get ahead. And no matter how much money I have, I feel like it's never enough because X, Y, and Z happens. But instead, looking at it in this way with all the 12 months in front of me, I can see, okay, this is what was going on this month and this was what was going on previous months, and then I can really see certain patterns. And that was the other thing too, and I think I needed to circle back around to this is yes, I was obsessively looking at my accounts, but I wasn't always planning as well as I thought that I could have. Like I was
Mm.
planning, and there would be certain things that I would sort of forecast out, but then I would always be like a little bit off, or something would happen, and then I'd be in these situations where it's like, okay, well, am I doing this or am I doing this? And it would just cause a lot of like just extra stress that didn't need to be there. And just going through your program and hearing you like help me kind of break things down even further, now it's like, okay, I do know that these things, even though they seem like emergencies that are just one-offs, do tend to be patterns in some way that I could be a little bit more proactive planning for those. And it's not something that I used to be someone that just wanted to overhaul things overnight, but the program has also helped me to just realize like I don't actually have to overhaul it or tackle everything overnight because that's just going to create that pressure. But I can just start taking little steps each month to kind of prepare for things.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, that's so powerful. And I think a big part of this that I'm hearing you touch on is that in empowered abundance and this work that we're doing around your money, there's always an internal component and there's a tangible external component. So the tangible real life example is, you're making progress, things are going well, and then like an emergency vet appointment pops up out of the blue, and then, oh, I can't get ahead. I got to pay for this. But then there's also the internal side of what you make those things mean about you, what it means about you that you have to pay these bills, the story that you're telling yourself about how you can never get ahead and how it's always happening. And often we have an inaccurate story around money. one that's rooted in scarcity, fear, lack, not enoughness. Because the truth is life does happen. And yes, in this program, I teach you how to get in control of your money and in control of your life, but that includes learning how to recognize that life is always lifing and that there are things outside of your control, and learning how can I ride those waves, not just the financial waves that are going to come and go, but also the massive emotional waves that come with them, because your money ties deeply into your emotions. And I remember that was a big theme through our time together, was how can I ride these emotional waves without them constantly taking me out and making me feel like I'm going down a failing downward
Right.
spiral.
And that was helpful to look at too, because, and I don't mind like talking about this on the podcast, but I have PMDD. So looking at my money every day like that also wasn't really helpful for my mental health in general, because how I would feel about something during one part of my cycle wouldn't necessarily be how I would feel, wasn't actually accurate. So by working with the cycles in this program, that helps me out. And then even still, like as much as I keep myself to that weekly money ritual date with myself. If I know that this isn't the right time for me to do that, then I can put that aside, because I know that it's not all going to fall apart if I take a week off from looking at it, because I have these systems in place now. That way I can always look at my money from a more empowered and peaceful space than sitting down and being like, this is going on and frantic. Because there were a couple times in the program where I was talking about how I had showed up to my sessions with myself in that state and it didn't go well, and realizing that no, every time I kind of do it in this very like cozy way where I make my special warm drink and just like kind of even say, I don't know, it's almost like a ritualistic prayer beforehand and really get myself into that meditative state, then I'm able to see things and approach things and make the decisions that I'm making with my money from the place that I want to be at. Because seeing the fact that I was always
Uh,
just showing up randomly or daily in any state of mind means like how you're approaching that might not be from the place you really want to be approaching it from.
Yeah, and that's so accurate and such a good example of how, the financial situation can be exactly the same. And yet, the way that we feel about it can drastically change depending on what's going on in our life. If we're in a bad mood, if something else completely unrelated to money happened, right? Like if we piss someone off and we're feeling bad about ourselves, like that's going to make us feel stressed about money and be like, it's all hopeless and it's not working. So I love that you're touching on the fact that it's not really about the financial situation or the amount of money. It's about your thoughts and your feelings around money and what you're projecting onto your money. And so a big part of this work is, balancing those emotions and really having a high level of emotional regulation so that you can come to your money from a clear, clean, objective energy, and also having the spreadsheet and the tool so that you can see it very clearly and cleanly and objectively. So we're not just like projecting all of our stories of, I can't get ahead and I'm stressed out and it's not working, onto our money all the time.
Exactly.
So good. Okay, as we start to wind down our time here, I would love to know, because I know you've been thinking about this podcast and I know you've been thinking about our time together. Is there anything that you really wanted to talk about, wanted to highlight, or something that we didn't get to touch on yet that you really want to share?
I feel like what's been really cool and helpful about this whole experience is realizing that at the end of it, I didn't actually have to make too many changes at all in my life. That it gives me more space, I guess, in between things to make decisions. So it didn't have to be all or nothing. So ultimately, I did decide to stay at my job, because by approaching my money the way I started approaching it, I also started approaching my job in different ways as well, and really sort of releasing a lot of that pressure and applying some of the strategies to money to how I was approaching tasks at work and taking a lot of that pressure off as well. And the world did not fall apart. If anything, in some ways, things got better. And that's not to say that I don't know how things will change from year to year, but it definitely gave me things to think about because I know a lot of this is really geared towards people who are going to go into entrepreneurship. And I am not an entrepreneur, but it was still valuable for me to go through those parts of the program as well to see where some of my skills could apply elsewhere if I wanted them to. And just the part we didn't talk about was really the vision section, which after all that other work that we did was so important too, because sometimes it can be difficult for me to know exactly like what is my actual vision. Sometimes it'll feel like it's changing a lot. And just by doing that work also gave me a lot more insight into what my actual values are and what my overall vision is and the way I can more strategically work towards that while still feeling like I'm living abundantly now was very helpful. So we've got the trip coming up next month, but we're also finally investing in like a house renovation project that I've always wanted to do since I moved in this house over
Oh my
15
gosh.
years ago. And we actually just got the official estimate today. So we're gonna go for
Wow.
it.
Oh my gosh, that is so amazing. Congratulations. And I really want to highlight this too, how when you came into the program, you were actively like leaving your job. You were taking steps to leave the job, and that was what felt most in alignment for you. And by the end of the program, you decided to stay, but if I remember correctly, it wasn't from a resigned place of like, oh, I just have to stick it out. It was, I'm making this decision and I'm making this decision from an empowered place versus before I was just trying to run away from this situation that I don't like. And I feel like you were able to find the abundance that was already present here in your current situation and here in your current life. Not to say you have to stay there now. Like if you wanted to change, you could make that powerful decision too, but from a different energy instead of making decisions from like fear and scarcity and trying to run away from a situation you don't like.
100%. Yes.
Oh my gosh. And now you're going to Germany and renovating your house. I mean, how does that feel?
Pretty amazing. And it hasn't really changed anything. So I don't want people thinking, oh, what she came away from this program is she must have had like a pile of money that she was sitting on and never spent anything. And now this program has made her go the opposite way and she's just becoming this YOLO person. No, it's more like because I'm seeing things clearly and looking at, okay, these are actual clear priorities and these are the necessities. And then this is, what's over here. And we talked a lot in the program. It seemed like a theme of like sacrifice was coming up. And I know
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes it can feel like when it comes to money, like, oh, I have to give up like everything I want to have this thing instead. But the way you kind of walk us through the vision part of it, it doesn't feel that way at all. It doesn't feel like how it used to feel like when I'd be budgeting and I'd feel like, oh, like this uber responsible, resigned, like I have to energy, like I need to make sure I'm doing X, Y, and Z with my money, and then feeling like you can't really enjoy it. And even when I was doing things that I would enjoy, there'd always be this sort of like weird feeling that like, oh, this isn't the responsible thing to do. But now I'm just in a place where I'm like, okay, these actually are my top two priorities. I can make them work. There are strategic ways to do this. I'm not taking a big risk and like being completely irresponsible. It's more that I see like what I'm most aligned with and what I wasn't really that aligned with, and then looking at creative ways to make it all happen. And I think the biggest thing is I was someone who was always putting things off into the future all the time and be like, well, eventually when this happens,
Mm-hmm.
then I'll be able to do this thing. And a big part of the program is like, how can you live your vision now? And that was something that really stuck with me because I think I take for granted that I'll have all that additional time, that I will eventually get to them, but there's really no guarantee with that. So I would rather start
Yeah.
enjoying my life now. now.
Uh, Wow. Yeah. So your financial situation didn't really change that much, but the way you felt about money, the way you saw money, the way you thought about money, the way you used it was different. And you stopped coming at your money with this perspective of sacrifice. And instead, you started using your money to bring your vision to life now, but in a way that still honors your responsibility as an adult, as a mother, and being able to do the things you need to do to survive and support yourself, but also being able to live the life you want to live now without money holding you back, which is exactly what abundance is, and living your most abundant life. So, thank you for coming on the show and sharing all of your examples. The last question I want to ask you is, enrollment is officially open for the next round of Empowered Abundance. And I know there are some people listening to this podcast who are on the fence. They're thinking about it. They're wondering, is this the right choice for me? And I know at one point in time, you were also one of those people who was deciding, is this the right choice for me? So, for those people who are on the fence, and past Amy, who was on the fence, what would you say to her now?
Well, 100% do it because you made the right decision. And if anyone would be the type of person to be totally on the fence, it was me of the past because that was such a big investment and that wasn't the type of thing that I would normally do. But I just felt like, I don't know, there was just this inner knowing that this is the right time and this is the right opportunity. And I was definitely right about that because I feel like not only did it help my relationship with money, but it really helped my relationship with myself because that's what I've really come away with this is that your relationship with your money is really just a reflection of yourself. So once I kind of got that part more situated and was able to see that more clearly, I realized like I'm seeing myself more clearly in how I'm showing up and the way I just want to live and be in alignment with my vision. And it just brings about a peace that I really just have never known when it came to money or in general, even at work and in other situations, because like I said from the beginning, there was always this like underlying anxiety that like at some point it was all just going to fall apart. And instead, I've come away realizing that no, like I really can trust myself. I have the skills and tools, and things will pop up because that is a natural part of life, but it will all just like sort itself out. It will, like, I can always figure things out, and it doesn't have to be this big, scary, chaotic thing. It can just be something that you can breathe through, plan through. And I just feel like that's something that's going to carry me all the way through the rest of my life, not just through my career years.
Oh my gosh. Amy, thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing your story, sharing your journey, going through the Empowered Abundance program, and just what your takeaways were. It's been so valuable to get an inside look on your experience going through this program. And I know it's super valuable for people who are listening in and are in exactly that same spot that you were in before you went through this work. So thank you so much for coming and being a guest on the Empowered and Abundant
Thank you for having
podcast.
me.
And for everybody listening, again, enrollment is open for the next round of Empowered Abundance Group 9. Doors are open right now, which means it is your opportunity to schedule a free consultation with me. On this consultation call, we're going to explore, what does your current relationship with money look like, and how can you step into your next level of abundance through the support of Empowered Abundance. And I'm going to help you decide if joining Empowered Abundance is the right next aligned step for you. So go ahead and schedule your free consultation so you can get results like Amy using the link in the show notes below, or by going to my website, thebizhippie.com/abundance. Thanks again for tuning in to this week's episode. Have a great rest of your Money Monday, and I will see you next week.